2 days ago, I was in a fairly serious bike accident and I almost could have died. I mean, for what? A job, for money. Is that stuff really worth it? Is that honestly worth risking your life for? My dad bought me a bike for Christmas. It came in the mail from Amazon and it got here early January. When I got the bike, I took it out of the box and I partially assembled it. But some of the parts needed tools that I didn't have at the moment to fully assemble, so I just kind of chained the partially built bike to the fence and it sat there for quite a while until about a month ago in March when I decided to get the tools that I needed to fully assemble the bike. But when I went to assemble it, I discovered that the front brake line wasn't connected properly. I don't know what they didn't do that at the factory. And so I fought for 3 or 4 hours to try and get the brake line connected, and there wasn't anything I could do. It wasn't working. So I thought, great, brand new bike, and I already have to take it to a bike shop to get them to fix the brake line. Well, at least the back brake works. That's the most important one. You don't want to be stopping very hard on the front brake or you'll go flying over the handlebars. But the back brake worked, so I knew that it was rideable to some extent. But I wasn't very happy with it. I put a picture up of the bike here so you can see what it looks like. Last week I got a phone call from a company that wanted to interview me, and initially we did a phone interview and that actually went really well, so they invited me for an in-person interview out to their office. Now their office is in Richmond and it's 16 kilometers away. Now, if you happen to know the local area from about Burnaby, where I live here, and it's down the 91 highway, it's 16 kilometers. And according to Google Maps, that would be an hour's bike ride there or about 3 to 4 hours walking. So I thought I would take my bike there because I have a bike to use. I have a vehicle that I can drive. It's perfectly functioning and it runs well, but it's not insured and it's not registered because I don't have the money for that. And I'm too broke to afford a taxi ride down there. I live in Vancouver, so Uber's not even an option, and transit is just way too difficult for me to deal with. I can't do that. So I decided I was going to ride my bike, and the interview was scheduled for Thursday at 2 p.m. and I decided to leave at noon because even though it was an hour's bike ride there, I'd never taken the route before and I figured I might get lost, and I just wanted to make sure I had that extra time in order to get there. So I left the house at about noon. It would be my first time riding this brand new bike. I've never ridden it before, and it was at that point that I discovered that I don't know what happened. The back brakes just fell apart. It's just sitting there, chained to the fence outside. Nobody's touching it, and something happened with the mechanism of the back brakes, and the entire thing just fell apart, and the cable's just hanging loose. And so I'm like, great. There's no front brakes, and there's no back brakes either. And I don't have enough time now to actually walk there, and I don't know how to get there any other way. And so I decided against all better judgment that I would ride my bike without brakes. 16 kilometers down the bank of a steep inclined hill, and that I didn't even have a helmet either, so that was stupid. I can't afford a helmet. I don't have money. I don't have money for anything, and I only made it about 4 blocks away from my house before I started going too fast to control, and I couldn't stop with the brakes, and so I thought that I might put my foot on the tire, on the front tire, put my right foot up there to brace it, put some pressure on there. But when I did that, my foot slipped off and went into the spokes of the tire that is spinning, and it got pulled up into the handlebars and lodged between the handlebars and the tire, and that caused the front tire to immediately stop. So I went flying over top the front handlebars, and I ended up landing on the concrete on my hands and my left knee really hard. I thought I had hit my head at some point because my glasses, they had gone flying. But I guess I didn't because I didn't black out and there wasn't any marks or cuts on my face either. So I didn't really hit on my head, mostly on my knee, and it went pretty deep. It didn't go as far to the bone, but it was a very deep cut, and there was blood everywhere. And so I'm covered in blood, and it was pouring rain too. The weather was not great. I had brought with me a bag with a change of clothes for the job interview. The bag was tied up, so nothing really went flying out of the bag, but that went flying a bit down the road. And I was sitting there on the ground covered in blood, and my foot was lodged very deep into the tire. Now, I've been in bike crashes before, and you get cut up and it hurts, and you usually just stand up and you can maybe walk your bike back home and wash yourself off. But it was because my right foot was lodged so deep into the tire. I tried pulling it out as best I could, but it wasn't moving. And the neighbors at some point, they had seen what had happened, so they came rushing out, and one guy tried to help me get my foot out. I told him, no, don't touch it, because one of the things that I remember from first aid training with the Air Cadets is if something's broken, you want to leave it in the position that it was broken until the paramedics can get there, because they'll know what to do. Otherwise, you could cause more damage in the long term. And I was convinced my foot was broken because the way that it was bent and disfigured inside the tire, I thought for sure it was broken. So the neighbor said he was going to phone the ambulance, and he pulled out his phone, and I don't know if it wasn't on at the moment or he just couldn't get the numbers working, but he was saying something about he was having problems. But at that point, I had already reached out and grabbed my bag that had my change of clothes in it. So I pulled out my phone, called 911, and I explained what had happened to them and gave them the situation and my location, and they asked if there was anybody nearby, and at that point there was quite a bit of people starting to gather around, and so I said yes, and they told me at one point to hand them the phone, so I gave the phone to the neighbors, and they were talking with the authorities. It took about 8 minutes before the fire truck actually showed up. I was expecting an ambulance. Initially it was just a fire truck that came, and there was about 7 or 8 firemen and the fire chief as well, and they had seen my foot in the tire the way it was, so they had cut my shoelaces to pull my shoe off, and they had cut my sock to have a look at my foot, and then they had ended up cutting some of the bike spokes to get my foot out. And initially I thought there was probably a lot of internal bleeding, because I could feel this huge throbbing at the end of my foot, but that was mostly because it was pinched between the tire and the front handlebars, and because of that it was restricting blood flow. But I thought it's either broken or there's massive internal bleeding. So when they finally got my foot out, they moved it around, they did some pressure testing with it, and they told me that my foot wasn't broken. And that was my number one concern at the time, because I did not want to have my foot broken. I did not want to be dealing with wearing a cast on it for the next month or the next 2 months that it would take to heal. And so that was a big relief. I thought maybe it was sprained or there would still be internal bleeding, but after a few hours actually it healed up fairly well. There wasn't even any marks on it to tell that it was damaged at any point. But my left knee, on the other hand, I mean, it's still pretty sore. I can't even bend it at the moment, and it hurts to stand on it because the cut went really deep and there was blood coming out everywhere. And it was pouring rain too. So at some point they had put me in the back of the fire truck because it was raining so heavily. And then they had put my bike in the fire truck as well. And they currently have it down at the fire hall. I have to go down there and pick it up. And I don't know what I'm going to do now. Get my bike fixed or something. I need the bike. The brakes needed to be fixed on it anyways. The back brake now as well as the front brake need to be connected, but now it needs a new front tire because they had to cut the spokes to get my foot out. And now the fire chief did offer to pay for the replacement to the bike if my parents didn't. And he asked me a couple times, like, will your parents pay for this? And I want to tell him, yes, they will, because my parents are very supportive of me. And they usually do pay for things out of severe necessity like this. But at the same time, I was like, I don't want to ask them for more money. I mean, I'm already a financial burden on them. Every time I turn around, I'm getting hurt or something's being broken or things need to be fixed, and it's just money out of their pocket left, right, and center, and it sucks because I feel like I'm just an absolute failure of a son. And I also got a huge lecture for not wearing a helmet, and I basically told him, look, I don't have any money. and I was on my way to a job interview with the only company that was willing to talk to me in 5 months. This is my absolute final chance at anything in this life. Because if I can't get this job, I'm going to be homeless in 2 months. And I don't have any money for anything, not even a bike helmet. And so he did offer to maybe buy me a bike helmet as well, because it's the law here to wear a helmet. And I did break the law, and there's actually a fine with that too. Now, I very highly doubt that I will get a fine for breaking that law just because he understands my financial situation. But I did get a good lecture nonetheless. Obviously, the fire chief wanted to make sure that I was aware that things could have gone a lot better. Even if my foot was broken, things still could have been a lot worse. I could have easily just hit my head without a helmet and blacked out, and that would have been it. I could have been in a coma. I could have hit my head and snapped my neck. I could have flown off in one direction towards the traffic, and I could have hit a car that was moving while I was moving through the air, and it would have just been instantly dead like that. I could have, if I didn't put my foot in the tire when I did to stop it like it happened, I could have continued to pick up speed down the hill, and I could have blown through an intersection with cars coming the other way and been hit by a car and just dead on the road, just like that. And it's like, what's worth it? Is a job and money really worth risking your life for? And so instead of spending the day at a job interview, I got to spend the day in the back of a fire truck. And at some point, an ambulance eventually showed up, and they really pressured me to go to the hospital. And I didn't want to go to the hospital because it's 3.5 kilometers away. And I wasn't going to walk back on an injured leg 3.5 kilometers. And I don't have the money for a taxi. And I know if I told them that, they'd say, yeah, that's a stupid reason. You should go to the hospital. The fact that you can't afford a taxi is a stupid reason. And so I just told them that I didn't want to go, and they said that they can't kidnap me. It's my decision, but they did convince me to go to a nearby walk-in clinic. Now, I'll put a picture up here. This is my leg at the clinic after they cleaned up most of the blood and wrapped it in bandages and put some disinfectant stuff on it. And they wanted me to get a tetanus shot too. I'm pretty sure I had one in high school, but they just wanted to make sure it's better to get it than not, just in case, because we don't want to get it infected and you can die from tetanus or something. So they told me that. Now, obviously, the firemen were asking where I was going, and I had told them that I was on a bike ride down to Richmond for this interview. I told them where the place was located, and they were telling me, geez, that's like a 2-hour bike ride at least to get down there. And I told them, Google Maps says it's an hour's bike ride down there. It's 16 kilometers away. And they're like, yeah, like that's going to be 2 hours to get down there on a bike. And in weather like 2 days ago, where it was pouring rain like it was, I mean, obviously there's risk of slipping on the road. There's risk of getting in more accidents and that. It's pouring rain to the point that you can't even see or keep your eyes open. It's not a good situation. So it probably would have taken even longer than 2 hours riding my bike had I actually made it down there. Now, obviously they had contacted the business and they had left a message on the machine saying I had been in an accident. And the guy that I was in communication with contacted me back and left a voice message on my phone, which I didn't hear, but when I was in the back of the fire truck, I phoned him up and wanted to make sure that he got the message, and yes, he got everything. And their number one thing, they just want to make sure that I'm fine, that I'm healing up, and that everything is good. They say, don't worry about the interview today, we'll talk about that later. I'm pretty sure that I can reschedule the interview. And now I don't want to say anything about events that have not yet happened. I don't want to make any assumptions about things that I know nothing about, and I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but I probably do have a fairly good shot of getting a job with this company. I think I might have had a good shot regardless, but now that this has happened, there's more to it. It's not just, hello, what is your name? What are your credentials? And what can you do for us? There's a story now to it. And so if they did hire me, then I become that guy who literally risked his life for this job. And that's not something a lot of people can honestly say, unless your job is actually dangerous in some capacity. Not a lot of people can say, yeah, I basically risked my job or risked my life for this job, or even the chance to get this job. Not a lot of hiring managers can say, oh yeah, that's the kid I hired. He's the guy who risked his life to get down here for an interview. But the thing is, how am I supposed to get there now? I've got a broken bike. I don't even know if I want to ride my bike if it does get fixed, because it's a fairly dangerous ride down there. It's always raining here in Vancouver, so again, more danger on the road, and I'd rather just walk. But walking 16 kilometers, 3 to 4 hours to get there, 3 to 4 hours to get back every day, I guess it's doable. And if I'm really that desperate, and I am, I may just do that. And that may have to be a sacrifice that I'm willing to take. But what's a stupid sacrifice that I should not have done, and what nobody should do, you should never risk your life for a job, or even the chance to get a job. Even if you're as desperate as me and you're facing homelessness, you shouldn't risk your life. And there was a ton of things I could have done differently. I could have phoned the company and told them that I can't make it today. We could have rescheduled it. I could have just sucked it up and paid for a taxi without the money that I have. All number of things that I could have done differently that I just didn't, because I'm that desperate. I was willing to risk everything. But that is how desperate I am to do anything. Nobody will talk to me. Nobody will hire me. This is the first company in 5 months that is even willing to give me a chance, and I blew it. I missed the interview, and I blew it. And I could have lost everything that day. And it's just, I can't believe how stupid I was. And so, I don't know. There isn't a whole lot more to say about this other than, I don't know. If things keep going the way that they have been, I may very well end up dead. If I keep pushing and fighting for this job that may never come, I may find myself in a worse situation than I was 2 days ago. It could get worse. It could continue to get worse. And I may very well end up dead. There isn't anything in life that is so important it's worth losing your life for. I just want to make that clear.